Hello, everyone, and welcome to our sixth career conversation. I'm Jeremy Latriano, the chair of the Emerging Professionals Committee at BuildGreenCT. Very excited to welcome Alysse Lembo-Buzzelli here today to talk to us a little bit about her career path and how she got to her current position in the sustainable sector. Before I do, I just want to give a brief introduction first to BuildGreenCT. Our mission to accelerate the just and sustainable transformation of the built environment in Connecticut through education, advocacy, and community building. If you are a qualified emerging professional, a student, a young professional, someone transitioning careers, we encourage you to become a member. As an emerging professional, you get a discounted annual membership for $45, as well as complimentary or discounted admission to Build Green CT events and educational offerings, including opportunities for professional development, education, and advancement, as well as opportunities to connect with industry and thought leaders throughout the state. Before we get into my conversation with Elise, I just also want to give some heads up about upcoming Build Green CT programming. At the end of January, on January 29th at 10:30 a.m., we have a lunch and learn with Rings End on high performance wall and roof assemblies. That'll be a digital event. I'm looking forward to that. And then also the Green Building Awards submissions are due by end of month, so make sure to get those entries in if you are interested in participating in this year's event. Looking forward to seeing those wonderful projects later this year. So without further ado, I want to welcome Elise. Thanks so much for joining us today, Elise.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Elise, I read that you are the Director of Program Development at Connecticut Green Bank. I thought maybe we could start just by giving a little bit of context, maybe a little bit of a description or explanation on what a green bank is and what a green bank does.
Yeah, sure. That's a good place to start. So in Connecticut, we were actually the Connecticut Green Bank was actually the first statewide green bank in the country. Our mission is to deploy clean energy, and now we've expanded into resilience and environmental infrastructure in the state by leveraging limited public dollars that we get to attract private capital investment into the state. So essentially, we're acting kind of as a catalyst to create programs, financing programs, incentive programs, leasing programs, et cetera, and trying to get those private capital investors to come into the state and actually fund the projects that we want to see done. So traditionally, we were looking at clean energy projects such as efficiency and renewable energy projects. Um, but we've since expanded over the last couple of years into environmental infrastructure and resilience, which is really exciting. Really kind of expanding the scope of sustainability um, in the state.
Very cool. Yeah, some really important work there. And something I think that falls a little bit outside of the building and design sustainable sector, which is great. We love to diversify the opportunities that we discuss in this program. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about maybe your role at Connecticut Green Bank and sort of your pathway to that role.
Sure. So my current role, I'm the Director of Program Development and Origination on the financing programs team at the Green Bank. So we focus on commercial financing programs, as the name implies. So projects, financing programs for commercial properties. Our main financing program that we have is called CPACE. It stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. That program's been around in the state for, let's see, what year are we in? 2026. So almost 14 years that program's been around. It's very mature. It's pretty well known. And it's a PACE program, PACE Property Assessed Clean Energy. A lot of folks are probably familiar with that term if you know anything about clean energy finance. And it's really a repayment mechanism. So it's a secure way to lend to a property owner, in this case, a commercial property owner, to do clean energy or resilient upgrades to their property. So that's kind of our main financing program. We also have a suite of solar products. So we have a solar power purchase agreement. We have a solar lease. We also have a separate loan program that's a little bit different than CPACE. as well as some battery incentive programs that the Green Bank co-administers with the utility programs. And then we also have some residential financing products as well. So what I focus on in my role in program development and origination is kind of working on the front end of the funnel, if you will, the project funnel. So my team works on kind of getting all of those inbound calls, leads, if you will, folks that are looking to make those sustainable upgrades to their buildings, and they need help to pay for them. So that's a big factor, right? In making sure that you can actually do a project is paying for it. So they come to us after they've kind of explored different incentives and worked with the utilities and, grant programs, et cetera. And when they have, kind of that leftover money that they need, they come to us to get that financing. So we work on that. And then on the program development side, the other half of my title, that's really kind of working with different stakeholders in the market to understand what the needs are in terms of financing clean energy projects. So we work very closely with our technical partners, the contractor community, the folks that are actually doing the work. They're the ones that are out there finding these projects for the most part. I'd say, 80 to 90% of the projects we see come from our contractors, bringing them to us and saying, hey, I have this project. It's a great project. It's going to save money. It's going to make their building better, more efficient, more comfortable, but they need help paying for it. So they bring them to us. So working with the contractors and making sure they have all of the tools and the education and the information that they need to utilize our programs in the market is really important. So working with them to train them, to educate them, and to be a resource for them, so they can use it when they're making their sales. And also just exploring other aspects of the market and kind of understanding what the needs are. I then do a lot of work with our actual program guidelines and creating the actual process and program guidelines to go along with these different programs. So creating those, and of course also thinking of different programs that we might need in the future. Where are the gaps? What are the parts of the market that we aren't serving, that the Green Bank could or should be serving, as a quasi-public entity, utilizing public dollars. Where should we be putting some of that focus? So thinking about that and trying to explore other options and potentially creating some new programs or new aspects of current programs that we have, to fill those gaps. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing currently. And I think you asked about my pathway too, but I don't know if you want me to jump right into that or if you've got
Well, I
some.
know that you've worked at Green Bank for some time now, and you've kind of had a few different roles there. Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the other work you've done and kind of how you ended up as director.
Yes. So I started at the Green Bank in 2014. Um, Actually on this same team. I've been on this team since I started. We were called the commercial and industrial team way back in the day when I started. Now uh, become the financing programs team. But really, I kind of started mostly focused on the CPACE program that I mentioned. I started as a program assistant. I really came in pretty green to financing. I had
No
gone
pun intended.
to, yeah, yeah, no pun intended. I went to UConn, up at stores, go Huskies. And I got my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's in natural resources, focused on environmental conservation. When I graduated, I took a not sustainable job, just a job, because it was 2009. And I know that seems like forever ago, but job market wasn't great. So I was just trying to find anything really. Took a job for about a year and then finally landed in the solar PV industry. That's what I first did. Ended up doing sales, which was really not my forte, I realized. I liked talking to people and explaining the benefits of solar PV and renewable energy and all of that great stuff, but wasn't so good at being like, okay, so now give me $40,000, please. I was like, it's fine, I'll just leave. You guys are good, just call me later if you want. I don't, whatever. So that, I wasn't a great salesperson. But it did introduce me to the Green Bank, actually, because the Green Bank at the time had incentives available to homeowners to go solar. So I learned a lot about the Green Bank in that role, and really, kind of bought my time a little bit and waited until there was an opening, and applied to the Green Bank, on the commercial team. So I had the renewable energy, clean energy knowledge, a little bit of it, right? But I didn't have any of the financial knowledge, so that was a little scary. But the Green Bank team and a lot of the leadership team is actually still there now. They're just phenomenal, super super smart people, and really welcoming and very much ready and willing to educate kind of junior folks that are joining the team. So that was really important. I was able to have a lot of really good conversations, get a lot of guidance from really, senior people, really, really smart people that knew what they were doing, and just kind of learned as I went. And over the years, got promoted here and there. So started as an assistant, and over 12 years, I've made it up to the director level.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like you found a really good fit for yourself, and that's it's wonderful to hear. You mentioned that your undergraduate degree was in natural resources and conservation, so I imagine you were fairly focused on sustainability from an early stage. Did you kind of always envision yourself working in the sustainable sector, or was there maybe a defining moment or project that solidified your commitment to sustainability?
Yes, the latter. So no, I actually, for a really long time, I wanted to be an architect, actually. And this really from a young age, I had wanted to be an architect, took a lot of construction and design classes. My high school I was fortunate to be able to take classes like that in high school. Took a lot of art classes, that kind of thing, really readied myself to be an architect. And when it came down to picking schools, I really fell in love with UConn. I never thought I would. I didn't know if I wanted to stay in state, or what, but I really loved UConn. And unfortunately, they didn't have an architecture program. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna just go in undecided and just play the field. Let's see what's out there. So I literally did that for the first 2 years. I was undecided until the very, very last minute. And it was exactly as you said. I took an environmental science class, and I have always been green minded, if you will. Growing up, we were always very conscious of that kind of thing, recycling and not being wasteful, and just basic things that you kind of do think about that you do in your household growing up. And when I got to UConn, I got involved with the student environmental group EcoHusky, which I became one of the president. I became the president of that group at one point. But got involved in that, took an environmental science course, and I was like, I found it, totally found it. This is what I want to do. Ended up in natural resources, because there was less math in natural resources than there was in environmental science. And I am not good at math. So decided to pursue that and focus on environmental conservation, which was kind of all encompassing. And I thought I'd have a better chance of finding something in the world if I, went environmental conservation as opposed to something like wildlife management or other concentrations that were available for natural resources. Um, and it was great. I loved all of those classes, and it was a really really good fit. And I was very happy that I ended up, kind of winging it for a little bit, taking all those prerequisites that I needed, excuse me, and trying to figure out what I might be interested in. it was an important time, those 2 years for me to take to know where I wanted to land.
So it sounds like you mentioned that your educational background was in sustainability, but you went on to work in sales initially and then in finance, and there was a bit of a gap there, maybe in terms of what you knew and what you kind of had to learn on the fly. But were there
Mhm.
any at the same time, maybe skills, things you picked up during your education or training thereafter, that helped you prepare really well for a career in sustainability?
Oh, that's a good question. I think generally speaking, when for me, it was not generally, it was just not being afraid to ask questions. I mean, not really kind of pretending that you knew something that you didn't, really kind of being like having no ego going into a new role, um, putting forth your best qualities and what you know you can bring to the table and how that relates to the role that you're looking to fill or that you're in, but also understanding like these are the points of growth that I know I I need to fill. And this is where I need help, and this is what I want to learn more about. And I think asking questions and taking the initiative to have those conversations with people that are willing to have them with you, and that following up on those and continuing to just learn every day as you go, I think really goes a long way, um, because it not only proves that I think it shows your like honesty and your what's the word I'm looking for? Really like that your ability to like know what your limits are, but also to show that you're willing to do the work to get to a point where you become, an expert in something. And I think people really value that. I know that's something that we definitely look for in general with folks that are joining the Green Bank is kind of that like self-starter aspect of, we know we're not going to hire an expert in a role because that's nearly impossible, right? You want to hire somebody that's going to learn and grow, and be ready to do that. So I think having that willingness that eagerness and that willingness to learn and ask questions, I think is an important skill to have in a new seeking a new role.
I think that's great advice, very practical, and honestly something that we've heard in some extent from several of our guests. I think really critical to building a career, building relationships, and continuing just to grow as a professional. You mentioned that asking questions, having not having an ego, and be willing to kind of adapt and learn on the fly are qualities that you look for in candidates that you're interviewing and hiring. What are some other qualities, or maybe experiences, educational backgrounds, certifications that you look for in the people that you interview or look to hire?
Yeah, I mean, certifications and it's obviously going to vary quite a bit, but if we're thinking about, like my team, the folks that work on, what I work on, maybe the broader financing programs team, um, a really big, really important quality is having really good communication skills, verbal, interpersonal, written. All of that is really important. We do a lot of work in a seemingly short amount of time. So we need to be efficient. We need to be to the point. We need to be clear. And that's something that I know everybody on the team really values is someone who's like clear and concise and a really good communicator. Another aspect I think is the ability to adaptability, I guess is the word, is being able to pivot in a conversation from, talking to somebody about one aspect of a program to hearing them say, well, this, that, and the other. And now you're thinking, oh, well, this totally isn't going to work. Now I need to pivot to this whole other program to discuss with them because they said this one word, so understanding, how to pivot and move dynamically through a conversation and through a relationship really many different types of stakeholders is also really important. So being adaptable and also being dynamic in their ability to, jump from thing to thing and stay, efficient and working well. Those are important aspects that I know I look for when I'm generally hiring folks for my team.
Yeah, and I think aspects that really people from any sort of professional or educational background can demonstrate. So definitely very practical advice there again. Thank you.
Yeah.
What I like about your story is that it's your career path has been somewhat indirect, right? You maybe didn't always have the vision of where you would end up as being in finance or in green bank sort of industry. Along that path, what were some of maybe the biggest challenges that you faced in regards to your professional career, and how did you overcome those?
Well, I like to, so one thing that I think is also maybe a little bit atypical these days is I went straight into the workforce after undergrad um, for a lot of reasons. One of them was I'm not like a huge school person. I'm not like I don't love school. So I really was excited to kind of get out into the workforce, even though it was not like the greatest economic time to like look for a job. Most of my peers went on to get their master's or graduate degrees because it was just not a great environment to find a job at the time. But I really didn't want to do that. I was done with school for a little while, so I was like, let me get into the professional world. And for me, that was an excellent choice because of that aspect and others, but also um, when I did decide to go back to school, which I did in 2017, I decided to work full time and do a full time master's program. I got a master's in sustainable design from the University of Florida, which kind of married my architecture and sustainable love into one thing. Um, but it it made a really big difference for me to wait a couple of years. I had already been, out in the professional world for, 5, 6 years at that point. No, longer, 8 years. And for me, it gave me time to mature, really, and also to have a really good grasp on like what I wanted to learn more about. Because I didn't want to, I wasn't like, I want to learn everything. I wanted to learn something that I was really going to be interested in, and that fit the bill perfectly. So taking that time to figure that out was important, but also it allowed me to understand what um what the workplace, like what a work environment was like, and how all of these new things that I was going to be learning would actually apply. I feel like if I were to go directly from undergrad to a graduate program, myself in that situation, I would have missed out on that. It wouldn't have been as applicable, I think, in my mind. Like as I was learning and doing my graduate program, I wouldn't be relating it to like, okay, that's how I would use this in my current role, or that's how I could use this in a future role. Um, so that was really an important thing. So I think the challenge there that I overcame was, um, well, working and going to school full time was difficult. It was done in a year, which is what I wanted. It was just 12 months of chaos, but it was great. I'm glad I did it that way. And in hindsight, it worked out. But I also chose to do working in the finance industry. I chose to do a sustainable design program as opposed to some pressure, I think, generally to do like an MBA. Was not interested in that at all. I just didn't again, I didn't want to do school that I didn't want to do. So, um, I kind of didn't do what a lot of my peers do in the finance industry. I did not get an MBA. And I think it's serving me well, or it will serve me well now that we are kind of moving into in environmental infrastructure and resilience. I think that aspect, like that education that I received is going to be helpful as we and I work with my team to start to develop some of the guidelines and the programmatic requirements and things that go along with um, financing resilience projects in for commercial properties. So um, I think it worked out.
I'm definitely in the same boat. I was ready to be done with college when I graduated. I somewhat reluctantly went back to a master's program and finished it as quickly as I could. But I will say that that master's program really allowed my career to, I think, kind of take off and for me to really get a foot in the door in the sustainability industry and get my current role at 475. And it sounds like similarly that your master's program was pretty valuable in the end and sort of critical to where you've ended up today.
Yep, definitely.
I know you mentioned that there are some gaps in the market that you're considering when you're creating guidelines for some of the programs that you're working on.
Yep.
What are some of those gaps? And I guess what changes have you seen or trends have you seen in the sustainability field over the past few years?
Yes. Well, some of them we don't know yet. I'm sure we'll find them out there. But there was one that's been addressed, I think, actually quite well um, recently in terms of clean energy is multifamily properties. So we do with CPACE financing, we do a lot of existing properties that want to retrofit their property in some way to add efficiency. Again, traditionally, we're doing resilience now, we're building that, but traditionally we're talking about clean energy. And it was really difficult for multifamily properties, um, I think, to take advantage of some of the incentives and things that were out there, because they kind of straddle that like commercial residential line, right? It's, you know, a building with a bunch of folks that are living there. It's a residence for many people, but it's not a single family. It's not a duplex. It's, there's 100 units, for example. So it kind of straddles that. But there have been some changes, especially on the solar PV incentive side, that have allowed affordable multifamily specifically to participate in the market, really, and be able to get the incentives that are necessary to make those types of projects work. Um, so the utility, the Eversource and UI overseen by Pura, they have a solar incentive program, or two solar incentive programs. They have the NRES, the Non-Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program for commercial properties, and then the residential RRES. Previously, affordable multifamily properties needed to participate in NRES. And they weren't competitive. It just wasn't working out. They weren't really able to get those incentives as they should. But recently, they made the change to allow for affordable multifamily properties to participate in RRES. The incentive is higher, and there are requirements. The incentive is higher on the RRES side than on the NRES side. And there are also requirements that say that the landlord needs to share the benefits with their tenants, which is really, really important. So everybody wins. Landlord gets these benefits from the solar system. There's tax incentives and things that are available. Um, but they need to also share those benefits with their tenants, and they can do that in a few different ways. One of them is to directly pass some of those savings to them, and other ways are to make improvements to the property, other types of improvements. They could be energy efficiency improvements, like upgrading a heating system, installing heat pumps, things like that. Or they could do other things like deferred maintenance things, like upgrading windows, paving parking lots, adding high-speed internet, things like that. So I think that's a really good example of a way that, the market, that wasn't something the Green Bank did. I can't take credit for that. But we are parts of those conversations when things like that happen. So, that was something that I think the realization out there happened, and we were able to, the market was able to pivot and make that change. That then did in turn allow for the Green Bank to create programs that would uh, complement that. So then we were able to create a solar lease program for affordable multifamily properties that allows these properties to also get solar. And like get solar through us, not have any, not have to pay any money down. We own the system. The Green Bank owns the system as a third party. And there's, lots of benefits to that. So little changes like that kind of create that ripple effect. And, we were able to recognize that change in the market and, make our own programmatic changes to, kind of fit in with that as well.
Great that you have some flexibility and are able to sort of adapt as things change because sustainability is still such an emerging sector in many ways, and the landscape is always sort of shifting. So, yeah, great. Thanks so much for sharing that industry knowledge. We're getting towards the end of our time here, so I just do just want to open it up to our Build Green CT attendees here. See if there are any questions from the audience.
Hey, Alysse. Well,
Hey,
first of
Sarah.
all, I think it's funny that you said you don't like math and you work in finance,
It's true.
but that just,
It's not that I don't like it. I'm bad at
well,
it.
I caught that
we
too.
won't tell anybody there. You
Yeah,
said
and I
that.
chuckled. I love that.
I have a calculator. Don't worry. It's fine.
Well, I think that sort of like just goes to show that like if you're resourceful, you can figure out how to do it, how to do something you want to do. Um, anyway, I also liked both you and Jeremy commenting on kind of how important it is to be well-rounded. I mean, we find that in architecture. I mean, we need to be good at design, but we also need computer skills. We need to be able to write well, to write proposals or, communicate with people. We need to, review contracts. And so it's so, I think it's so valuable for people to have even like a different background than what you end up doing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
also I respect and appreciate that you took time off. I mean, I really think it's also really valuable to not, push through because you're supposed to, finish school in 4 years or 6 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Take the pressure off, figure stuff
Yeah.
out.
Now, my
Exactly.
my first job, I could really relate to that. I went to school for psychology, and my first job was I worked at a radio station because I just needed a job. But anyway, that was really interesting. I learned a lot about what you do, and even though I've known you for a while because you serve on the Build Green CT board, but I learned, I have a better idea of what you do, and I'm very intrigued that you work with different stakeholders. And I'd love to ask a question about that. But
Sure.
I actually want to know, I was thinking as I was listening to you, what made you decide to run for and serve on the board of Build Green CT? And as, as a result of serving on the board, what impact, if any, has that had on your career?
It's a funny story because I feel like whenever I feel like I've told a couple of board members, they're like, oh, who nominated you? Like, how did, and I was like, I just nominated myself. I just was like, oh, there was an open call and I had joined the mailing list at some point, and I was like, oh, this seems like a thing I should do. I should get on a board. Like, I'd never had any experience with a board other than being at the Green Bank and dealing with our board of directors, and what we do, like how we as staff would be presenting to them as board members. And so this came about, and I was like, this seems like a thing I should try. Not really knowing if I'd get on the board or not, but I was like, throw my hat in the ring, and I got on the board, which was great. So I came in again, super green, not really knowing much about being on a board. I'd never been on a board before. Um, but it's been really, really eye-opening. And of course, being on the board of a nonprofit is totally different than being on the other side of the board table from like, you know, at the Green Bank Board of Directors. It's completely different. But it's been really eye-opening and kind of understanding like all of the biggest thing for me is like the governance processes. Like that's really helped me in my role, again, on the other side of the table in my professional career, knowing how those processes work and like how how things have to go in order to move them forward. That's been really, really important. That's been a really important skill that I've learned with Build Green. But also, I mean, I really just joined because I wanted to meet you all and network with people that were in the sphere, but also a little bit outside of the sphere that I was in. And I thought that this was a perfect way to do that because there were different, you know, we've got architects, we've got, you know, other technology professionals, we've got, you know, all kinds of different, we've got utility representatives, we've got all different types of folks, you know, college staff, you know, professors and so on. So it really was a way for me to kind of get myself into the world, and also just make some new contacts and do some networking. And yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Is it, do I get to ask a second question?
It doesn't seem like there's a queue, so yeah, by all means.
All right. Well, I can't, I have to, this one, I had two, I'm sorry. Um, we have a jobs board and we get notices from the Green Bank that, you know, when there's openings. And in fact, we have two openings on our jobs board and they're both for people starting out at, for internships, summer internships at the Green Bank. And
Yeah.
it just made, as I was listening to you, and you mentioned that the Green Bank is really great for like what I got was they're really great for training, and you know if you're, what you know, have you worked with any of the interns? You know, what's that experience like? What can you share?
Yeah. So I did for a long time. I would actually manage the intern that we would get for the commercial team for a while. Maybe like after 2 or 3 years of being on the team, I became that person that was managing the intern. Um, on our team recently, the financing programs team hasn't had an intern recently, and that's just because of honestly bandwidth and kind of where, you know, other things have fallen over the years. But in terms of joining as an intern, I think we've had a lot of, I know personally, I've had a lot of positive feedback about not just about the role that they're doing, but just about the general experience of being at the Green Bank. Kind of like you said, Alicia, I think that the overarching opinion from a lot of folks coming in as an intern is being able to learn in real time from real people as we're doing real things. You know, where we don't, I mentioned this before, we need to do a lot of things in a short amount of time. I mean, we're a state agent, quasi-state agency. You can imagine we have like half the amount of people we really need. So, you know, we're doing a lot of work. So, you know, we get the interns in and they gotta kind of got to keep up. But I think it's fun for them, and I think that a lot of folks have a good experience in that because it's not just a lot of it's not just, you know, like the mundane things that you
Mhm.
might think of an internship. You're not just like making copies and stapling papers and like, you know,
Yeah, dynamic.
whatever, doing your TPS reports. If there's any Office Space fans out there, but it's yeah, I think it's real stuff. You know, we're having them help us with real things. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely special projects that, you know, different teams have that they are saving
Mhm.
for an intern to do, you know, all of that. But I do think it's a fun experience and one that's very inclusive. You know, the interns are involved in all different types of meetings, and they're not just kind of sitting in a corner as an intern, waiting to make
Right.
coffee.
Yeah, that's cool. I did notice that the description on the first sentence is like, you get involved on day one. And I'm like,
Yeah.
exactly what you just said. So
Yep.
that's very
Right.
fun. Thanks.
Get
And
ready. Yep.
Sounds like a really valuable early work experience, that sort of experience. It definitely
Yeah,
something you talk about in interview later on and some real skills that you can develop and hone in there.
that's the hope.
Any other questions? We are at the end of our allotted time here, so there's no further questions. I think we can,
Well,
yeah.
I
Thanks,
guess
Sarah.
I'm sort of curious. So with your environmental studies time at UConn, I'm curious if you kind of stayed in touch with anybody, but more so, what have they, what did they turn into? What are they, I would imagine that's sort of a broad department. Like,
Yeah. I haven't kept in touch with a lot of folks that I knew in my program necessarily. But I do see, updates here
good
and
old
there on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah, good
Yeah,
old LinkedIn.
yeah.
And from what I can tell of all the people that I see, everybody is in some aspect of sustainability, which is kind of amazing. I mean,
Right.
again, there's a small subset of people, but they're all doing something. A lot of them aren't in the state anymore. There's a lot of folks that have, expanded outwards into other
Mhm.
states or even other countries. But it seems like it's a pretty solid pathway. Once you're on it, you're
Mhm.
on it. We're just in it. I did recently, actually, though, Sarah, I was asked to join. I don't know what it stands for because it's a lot of letters in the acronym, but it's the Speak Advisory Committee. It's a UConn advisory committee, and I was asked to join that as an alumni representative. So we've only had one meeting so far. We have a second meeting coming up uh, at the end of the month or maybe the beginning of February. It's coming up soon. Um, but so we're just breaking the surface there. I can probably share more. Maybe we can do like a blog post or something about it.
Yeah,
Build Green
nice.
can do something later, but um, still trying to stay involved with the goings on at UConn as much as I can. So I was happy to be asked to be on that board or committee,
See?
advisory committee. I guess it's not a board.
Figure that out by the next meeting.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah,
Alicia and I were kind of discussing this at the top, but one of the goals for this year, I think, is to get in touch with colleges, universities in Connecticut and try to expand the emerging professionals community. So maybe we can lean on you a little bit for some of those UConn connections when the time comes.
happy to do that for
Great.
sure.
You have anything else, Sarah?
Oh,
I guess
thank
I
you.
have another question. Like, how's the networking that you've done at BuildGreenCT like yielded any positive kind of outcomes? I'm wondering, like, there are a few people, like, for instance, at one point we had Ashley Stewart as one of our board members, and
Hmm.
she transitioned to working for the Green Bank at one point, didn't she?
Yep,
Or maybe
yep,
is she there now, or is she at,
she is.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, she was consulting for us for a while, and but now she's a Green Bank employee. Um, yeah, yeah. I think definitely I find myself pretty often, even in conversations, I'd say probably, more on the like program development conversation side. So some of the more like high level kind of conversations of like, what could we do here? I find myself often thinking, oh, I know somebody through somebody, or I know somebody on the board that might know somebody else, or someone on the board does this. And I do find myself pretty often thinking, I might know somebody who does that, or someone who might know somebody who does that. So I definitely think it will be helpful, especially this new role that I'm in as the director of program development and origination. That's really, it's a role I took on about 6 months ago. No, sorry, a little bit longer than that. But we were transitioning into kind of a new structure, so it was like a slow transition into this new role, and then I went on leave for a little while. So now that I'm back, I've been back for about 4 months. I'm really kind of launching into it. So it's still pretty new, even though the title's been there for a little bit. But I do think, Melissa, that in this new role, as I'm really digging into it, that I will be able to utilize a lot of those connections more because it's more, it'll be a lot more of strategic thoughts than maybe I was doing in the past. So it'll be a good avenue for me to go down when thinking about those.
Yeah, I kind of find that one of the things that people really find me valuable for is just the connections I can make, and just the people I know. And I'm always I'm always surprised that, you know, that I have all that information just from like all of the networking and all the work that I do for this organization, that is very valuable for other people, I think. So
Yeah, for sure. For
I
sure.
think that's a great advertisement for any emerging professionals or other viewers that might join us later on to, yeah, join BuildGreenCT. There's an opportunity to really make great connections in ministry, and I can speak to that as well.
100%.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Alysse, for making the time today. Appreciate you joining us in the thoughtful conversation. And
All right.
yeah, looking forward to seeing you at future BuildGreenCT events.
All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me. It's really, really exciting to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
Thanks,
All
Alysse.
right. Take
Bye.
care.